Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep into a world where birth wasn't just a biological event. It was a collision of blood, river water, gods, and the ever-watching sun. You find yourself in ancient Egypt, long before modern hospitals, before epidurals, even before chairs with backs. The Nile breathes beside you, calm and eternal, but your body is tense, alive with something older than civilization. You are about to give birth in a land where a woman's womb was seen as both divine and dangerous. And if you think you're in for a smooth ride, well, let's just say you probably won't survive this. Before we begin, if you find these stories relaxing or interesting, you can like, subscribe, share the video, or leave a comment to support the channel. Every bit of encouragement gives me the motivation to keep making videos every single day. Also, let me know your local time and where you're listening from. I love seeing the map fill with sleepy historians from all over the world. Now, let's drift into the story. It begins with the Nile. Everything does. Its slow, rolling tides aren't just the lifeblood of crops and commerce. They shape the very rhythm of life itself, including the mystery of birth. You walk barefoot on the moist clay near your home, your belly full with the weight of a child, the sun trailing a low, syrupy warmth over your shoulders. You know it's soon. The other women know too. The midwife has already passed twice this week, each time humming beneath her breath and glancing toward the horizon like she's watching for signs. You're not alone in this knowledge. Everyone, your mother, your sisters, even the neighbor who sells onions in the market, has taken one look at the way you hold your lower back and started making quiet preparations. It's a community affair, this ancient birth. The notion of privacy hasn't yet taken root. Your labor is not just your own, but a ritual enacted for generations. Your body, in this moment, is both sacred and entirely public. An ancient Egyptian thought the womb was not merely an organ, it was a symbol, a threshold between the world of the living and the unseen. A woman in labor was a vessel through which gods might pass. The goddess Hathor, with her cow ears and star-crowned hair, watched over the moment of delivery, her hands stretching invisibly across the air to shield you. Tauret, the hippo-bodied guardian with lion feet and crocodile tail, was already nearby, carved onto the wall or worn around someone's neck, her wide eyes daring any evil spirit to come closer. You feel the pull of the coming hours, not just in your muscles, but in the murmured prayers stitched into the atmosphere. A shallow bowl of natron used in everything from mummification to magic sits on the windowsill. The scent of blue lotus wafts from the room, its petals floating in warm water that's meant to calm your nerves or, at the very least, mask the less divine smells to come. There's no hospital bed, no crisp linen. What waits for you is a square of packed earth, smooth and warmed by a fire laid earlier. Around you, midwives arrange birth bricks, painted mud blocks placed beneath your heels and back, so you squat in a half-upright stance, letting gravity and breath do their ancient work. These bricks aren't merely functional. Sometimes they're inscribed with protective symbols. A frog ear, an ankh there, maybe even a hieroglyphic that translates roughly to, "Come safely, little one." It's touching. Until you remember that frogs in Egypt were also signs of plague. That's ancient symbolism for you, always a mix of charm and warning. Time in labor doesn't pass as hours. It passes in recitations, in cooling claws on your forehead, and the sound of someone grinding barley 2 rooms away. You lose track of the sun's arc, but not the midwife's voice. She chants softly, invoking Isis, who once stitched her god-husband back together and bore Horus in secret swamps. If she could do that, surely you can get through this. You groan, not entirely from pain, but from a wave of nausea and recognition. This is the hardest thing you have ever done. You are being pulled apart and reshaped. Your body, once just yours, is a passage now. And as you strain, someone presses a cool stone into your palm, smooth and flat, not to heal, just to hold, just to remind you that you are not untethered. And then, without ceremony or warning, the child is there. Not yet crying, not yet anything but potential. They wrap it in linens marked with old symbols, fold it tight like a mummy, but gentler. No clapping, no cheers. Only the sound of someone exhaling a long breath they've been holding for hours. You included. One historical tablet, damaged but deciphered, mentions a phrase used in moments like this. Her gates opened, and life walked through. Scholars still debate whether this was a metaphor, a prayer, or a formal record. But whatever it was, it feels true now. Something ancient has passed through you. Not just a child, but a continuation. A soft echo in the long corridor of Egyptian time. You hold the child, your skin sticky with effort and incense, and for a moment, you are both exhausted and infinite. Outside, the Nile moves on, indifferent. Inside, your heart keeps time with something far older than kings and crowns. Something warm and small and beginning. Your child sleeps beside you now, swaddled in linen that still carries the faint scent of resin and earth. The air is thick with a dozen different smells: burnt incense, milk, sweat, the crushed petals someone sprinkled beneath your cot, perhaps hoping the gods might notice. You lie still, not out of peace, but because your body has become a collapsed temple, hollowed, trembling, and sacred. And even in this stillness, there is work being done all around you. The midwife has not yet left. She sits near the entrance, sorting through her pouch of charms and ointments with the care of a priest attending a ritual. For in ancient Egypt, she is far more than a practical helper. She is part magician, part nurse, and part conduit to the divine. Her job is not finished at birth. It continues in oils and offerings, in the protective spells whispered as your baby sneezes for the first time, and in the placement of certain amulets near the cradle. You were warned not to bathe yet. The ritual cleansing must wait. For now, your skin glistens with protective oils mixed from juniper, myrrh, and something thicker, possibly rendered crocodile fat, though no one says so aloud. It's meant to seal your strength back in, to trick malevolent spirits into thinking you're already dead and not worth bothering. Egyptian logic was sometimes circular, but often effective. As your body recovers, your mind lingers on the peculiar mixture of science and sorcery that defines this whole experience. There is no word in your tongue that cleanly separates medicine from magic. They are the same. The ointment smeared across your chest is for healing and for protection. The spell chanted over your child's belly is for good digestion and divine favor. And the red ribbon tied to your ankle is there to distract wandering spirits who might otherwise sneak into your womb while it still remembers how to open. In one corner of the room, a set of figurines has been arranged. Clay images of the goddess Taurit, the protective lion-headed Sekhmet, and occasionally, even best, the squat, dwarfish deity with a lion's mane and the permanently grumpy face of someone who's seen too many births to be impressed by another. He's considered especially good at chasing off evil spirits with loud noises and strange dances. Some households even place a tiny carved version of him on the birthing bricks, just in case. Mainstream archaeological records show that childbirth in Egypt was primarily attended by women, with midwives holding substantial knowledge passed through oral tradition. Tools were basic: knives for cutting cords, bowls of warm water, and most notably, those decorated birth bricks, which archaeologists first discovered in the ruins of a Theban worker village. Each brick carried symbols, sometimes frogs, sometimes ankhs, and often geometric designs that may have held meaning now lost to time. What's quirky is that many midwives also carried small wand objects carved from ivory or hippo tusk. These wands, often etched with images of protective spirits, were likely waved or touched against the body during labor. Scholars still debate whether they were meant to channel divine energy, distract pain, or simply mark the midwife's authority like a magical badge of office. In your current haze, it doesn't matter what their original purpose was. What matters is that someone waves one gently near your face now, and it makes you feel strangely like things are under control. Outside, the sun reaches its lazy zenith. Light slants across the mud brick walls, catching on woven baskets filled with date cakes and honey water. Someone has already sent for a celebratory meal. This is not just a domestic event, it is a community one. Neighbors will soon arrive to coo at the child, offer blessings, or comment on how much it looks like your grandfather, even though its face still carries only the vague puffiness of newness. You wonder what your mother thought once, in this same position, if she felt the same confusion between awe and vulnerability, if her midwife whispered the same prayers, if she also imagined the child she'd brought into the world would somehow change it. But there's no time to dwell. A voice calls your name gently just once, and you're handed a small bowl. Inside, a strange mix of crushed garlic, honey, and barley. You drink it slowly, because you must. It's believed to replenish the blood, and depending on which region you're in, might even help keep away malevolent forces trying to drink the afterbirth from the spiritual plane. You wish that weren't something anyone needed to worry about, but here we are. The room dims as reed mats are drawn over the windows. You feel the weight of the child on your chest, not heavy, but grounding. Someone hums a lullaby in the next room, a melody older than writing, perhaps older than the pyramids. You can't tell if it's for the baby or for you. Historians continue to debate how much of these practices were truly religious versus cultural habit, whether the charms and chants were sincerely believed or merely inherited routines. But as you lie there, newly hollowed, newly full, it hardly matters. These rituals have carried mothers and children for centuries, and now they have carried you. And as sleep begins to press gently against the corners of your consciousness, you reach down and touch the warm forehead of your child. It stirs slightly, then quiets again. The birth is over. The real work begins. The house falls quieter, though not truly silent. Somewhere in the courtyard, someone beats laundry against stone. A goat protests being moved. The grinding of grain hums like a distant drum. But here, in this cool, shaded room, time seems to stretch itself thin, as though unwilling to move forward. Your body is sore, your thoughts clouded, and yet the world does not pause. Birth might be sacred, but life in Egypt doesn't stop not for miracles, not even for new mothers. Your child whimpers in its swaddle, face still creased with the softness of the womb. You adjust the bundle, noting how their eyes flutter beneath paper-thin lids. There is no nursery. No painted cradle or mobile of dangling stars. Only a woven reed basket lined with soft cloth and tucked near your mat. You think about putting the baby down, but some part of you refuses. The arms remember what the mind forgets, the ache of separation. There are tasks already, herbs to dry, water to pour, offerings to arrange. But the women around you, seasoned by their own dozen labors, wave you off. Today, you are allowed to float slightly above expectation. You are still between worlds. A little hollow, a little divine. It is time for the purification. Unlike later rituals, those grand temple cleansings and public immersions, the postpartum rite is intimate, whispered, and almost invisible. The midwife guides you to a shallow basin set with natron, milk, and crushed lotus petals. You do not soak. You are anointed, dabbed, pressed gently with cloths, soaked in mixtures that feel half medicinal, half magical. One includes a trace of date wine. Another smells sharply of mint and animal fat. You do not ask what's in them. You have learned that in Egypt, power lies not in the recipe, but in the repetition. Mainstream sources suggest these rituals stemmed from beliefs that childbirth rendered a woman ritually impure, necessitating cleansing before she could resume household or temple duties. But scholars still debate whether the practice was about hygiene, social order, or something deeper, an effort to spiritually seal the body's open doorways. Whatever the reason, it feels good. The touch is careful, the rhythm predictable. Someone hums as they work, a low tune that loops in circles. Around your ankle, the red thread is replaced. A sign. You've passed from one state to another. Then comes the record. It's easy to forget that the ancient Egyptians were bureaucrats at heart. Even birth required documentation, especially in households that could afford scribes. A boy's name might be inscribed on a tablet, sometimes even his umbilical cord dried and stored like a sacred relic. For girls, the records were less formal, more fleeting. A name spoken aloud, a token tied around the wrist. But always, something marked the arrival. The act of naming is both joy and shield. You think of the name long prepared short, strong, and anchored in old family sounds. But first, a ritual. You lean close to the baby's ear and whisper the name 3 times, each time slightly louder. It's not just for the child. It's for the spirits who might be listening, so they know whom not to steal. Outside, the sun begins to tip. The light filtering through the latticework takes on a golden edge, like everything's been dipped in honey. A neighbor arrives with a small gift, a bit of frankincense wrapped in linen. You offer thanks, and she places a hand briefly on your shoulder. Not quite a blessing, not quite a benediction. Just something passed woman to woman, as it always has been. And then the oddest thing, a stranger arrives. Or rather, a cousin of your husband's cousin someone, with barely a name in your mind, but now standing in your doorway, holding a thin reed stylus. He glances at the baby, at you. Then, with a shrug, he presses a soft wax tablet into your palm. Mark the day, he says. We'll need it for the family tally. You're not sure what to write, but your hands remember shapes, letters, the way your father once taught you numbers between sips of barley beer and curses at miscounted livestock. You write slowly, pressing the stylus into the wax. The date, the name, the weight, more or less guessed, then your own small mark, for those who might doubt your hand. He nods and leaves. It's a small thing, but it alters the air. The women glance at you differently now, not unkindly, but with an adjustment. A bride who writes, a mother who marks. You've nudged the shape of your role without saying a word. Quirky as it sounds, some Egyptian women were literate, especially in artisan and priestly households. Though rare, they left traces, names etched on amphorae, spells copied onto linen, even letters tucked into coffins. In a world where memory was the path to immortality, the ability to record was a subtle form of power. You sit back, wax tablet still worn from your hand, and watch your baby sleep again. The world has not changed. The goats still bleat. The river still flows. But you have written something down, something that says, I was here. I bore witness. And somehow, that feels like magic too. By the third night, you've grown familiar with the rhythms of waking to feed the child, not with irritation, but with a kind of solemn grace. The cries are not sharp or desperate more, like small signals from a creature still half dreaming, unsure of where the womb ended and this new world began. You stir from sleep, one eye catching the flicker of the oil lamp someone has thoughtfully left burning low. The house is hushed, the courtyard silent, except for the occasional yawn of a donkey or the rustling of palm leaves stirred by the desert wind. You sit upright, shift your feet against the cool floor, and reach for the bundle. You've done this several times now, but each time still feels like a quiet ceremony. You draw the child to your breast, and as the feeding begins, you glance around the room. This room you now know in every creaking reed and pitted mud brick. A space that belongs to the child as much as to you. A space that holds secrets in its shadows. This is when you notice it. A faint movement across the doorway. Not a person. A charm. Tied to the lintel is a cluster of bundled herbs, fennel, mint, and a small twist of papyrus wrapped with red wool. You didn't place it there, nor did the midwife. It must have been your mother-in-law, or perhaps an aunt. Either way, the meaning is clear. The house is now protecting something small and fragile. The bundle is a quiet guardian, watching in case your eyes grow too tired. In Egypt, infancy was perilous, not because parents didn't care, but because the world was crowded with dangers, both physical and spiritual. Illness, bad air, the evil eye, unnamed fevers, unseen things that brushed the soul. The line between superstition and medicine blurred constantly, and parents weren't in the business of debating. They used everything they had. Spells on doorframes, milk warmed 3 times, figurines buried in baskets, and songs. So many songs. Tonight, you hung one softly. You don't know where you learned it. Perhaps your own mother used it. The words are simple, lulling, but woven into them is the shape of an old prayer, a call for protection disguised as comfort. The child quiets, eyes fluttering, mouth slackening with drowsy relief. One of the other women told you earlier about a quirky custom, inscribing tiny spells onto scraps of linen and sewing them into the corners of a baby's blanket. Not for others to see, not even necessarily for you to remember. Just there hidden, but present. One woman once embroidered the face of a lion into the hem of a sleeping cloth, with the idea that demons might mistake the baby for something far too dangerous to touch. Historians still debate the role of these textile amulets. Were they part of domestic magic, or mere folklore passed among women without ever entering formal religious record? The line is blurred, but the practice leaves a tactile trace. A mother's faith, stitched with tired fingers into the edge of cloth. In the shadows, Your husband stirs, then falls quiet again. He is not unkind, merely peripheral in these first days. This is your domain, the female space. Even in temples, the goddess Isis was shown nursing Horus with quiet pride, while the world around her tilted in chaos. The image of the nursing mother held great symbolic weight nourishment, loyalty, even statehood. Some statues of queens featured them with infants, not just to show lineage, but to show strength. You don't feel like a statue. You feel like a vessel that has cracked and been resealed. You feel proud and unsure, honored and terrified. You feel ancient and very, very tired. Still, before laying the child back into their basket, you touch a thumb gently to their brow and whisper again the name you gave, a name that has already begun to feel like a shield. You don't whisper it for them. You whisper it for the room, for whatever else might be listening. Morning breaks gently, a veil of gold over the courtyard as the world shifts from sleep to movement. You feel it in the faint breeze threading through the latticework, in the distant shouts of merchants setting up their stalls, in the rattle of clay jars as water is poured and bread shaped with careful, dusty fingers. The baby still sleeps, but your body stirs with that old, inherited rhythm. When the sun rises, the work begins. This morning, however, brings something different. A quiet curiosity brews among the women. They speak in low voices over bowls of lentil porridge, glancing toward you with a mix of amusement and expectation. Finally, one of them stands and beckons. In her hands, 2 bowls. In one, barley seeds. In the other, emmer wheat. Nestled in both, a small bundle of linen, dampened and folded, resting like the seed of a riddle. You follow her outside, barefoot on warm stone, to the small patch of earth near the wall where herbs grow wild and persistent. She kneels and buries each bundle lightly in the soil. Then she looks at you, one eyebrow raised. It will sprout. Or not, she says. Then we will know. And that's how you learn of the pregnancy test. Historians now recognize this strange ritual as one of the earliest documented methods of pregnancy detection. Ancient Egyptian women, unsure whether they were expecting or eager to know the sex, would urinate on grains of barley and emmer wheat. If the barley sprouted first, it meant a boy. If the emmer, a girl. If neither grew, the womb was judged empty. It sounds improbable, almost whimsical. And yet some modern studies suggest there's a tiny grain of biochemical truth to the method. Perhaps not reliable, but imaginative. Still, the process was less about results than ritual. It offered a way to feel agency over something unknowable, to tether mystery to growth. You watch the damp soil as though it might move. It doesn't, of course. Not yet. As you rise to your feet, your back twinges. The wound of birth still lingers, hidden beneath linen and herbs. You step slowly back indoors, where the air is cooler and the baby has begun to fuss. The midwife meets your eyes and hands you a tea brewed from crushed dates and black cumin, thick and dark as tar. Bitter, but effective. The body, after all, must be coaxed back into order, and sometimes that means boiling bark and chewing on seeds. Quirky remedies abound. One woman swears by powdered ostrich eggs to ease cramping. Another recommends sitting over a steaming pot of myrrh. A third offers a charm shaped like a tiny frog, to be worn beneath your clothing until the 10th moon has passed. No one laughs at these things. There is too much mystery in the female body, too much left unexplained. In a culture where the Nile's flood is still a source of awe and terror, who dares mock the flood of blood and milk? Your baby wails, a sharp cry that cuts through the room like flint. You gather them close, noting the weight of their head, the gentle pulse beneath the skin. Their eyes are open now and focused, cloudy, but searching. You press your lips to their forehead and feel, once again, the enormity of it all. This tiny being is both a continuation and a new beginning. They carry your blood, your husband's name, the protection of half a dozen gods. Their future is unwritten, and yet it hangs over everything you do like a net waiting to tighten. Will they survive the fever season? Will they walk the fields or tend the shrines? Will they be remembered? You have no way of knowing. But today they are here, and that is enough. As the day stretches forward, more women arrive, neighbors, cousins, a friend from across the alley with a crooked smile and a carved rattle in her hands. They bring gifts, mostly simple things. A small bundle of cloth, a handful of dried figs, a red bead on a string. But each is given with murmured blessings and old sayings passed down through generations. One woman, older than the rest, brings something peculiar. A stone with a hole in its center, worn smooth by years of handling. She hangs it above the doorway with a piece of twine. So the bad things pass through and not stay, she mutters. No one questions her. No one needs to. Scholars continue to debate the purpose of such items, whether they were symbolic, apotropaic, or just inherited habits. But in practice, they are simply part of the language of care. A mother might not be able to read or write, but she could knot a cord, chant a spell, and hang a stone just so. Love speaks in gestures. By evening, the barley and emmer bundles still show no signs of sprouting. You smile. Of course not yet. The soil must be given time, like the child, like yourself. You sit in the doorway with the baby in your lap, watching the last light curl around the rooftops like smoke. Somewhere nearby, a girl sings to her goats. Somewhere further, a drumbeat signals the call to prayer. And in your arms, a new life wriggles, unaware of all that came before or all that waits ahead. Morning brings dust, heat, and the quiet certainty that the world expects you to return to it. Not fully, not yet, but enough to be seen, to move, to answer questions. You feel it in the way your mother-in-law begins assigning small tasks again, in the raised eyebrows when you sit too long, in the curious looks from neighbors, who now know your household contains a new mouth to feed. The grace period is over. The child lives. So now, life resumes. You step outside with the baby bundled close, not for a chore, but for a visit. The midwife waits by the garden wall, her frame wiry and weather-worn, hands always in motion. You've watched her deliver other children, pour boiling water into bowls of lavender, stitch tears in flesh without flinching. But today, she wants to show you something different. A place, not a task. She leads you beyond the house walls, toward a quieter quarter of the village, where the air carries the scent of tamarisk and goats. There's no sign, no marker, just a door, half open, and a faint hum of voices within. Inside is not a shrine, not quite a clinic, but something that pulses with the energy of both. A place women come when they are not entirely well, not entirely whole, and not entirely alone. This is the midwife's sanctuary, a chamber for bleeding, birthing, mending. The walls are pressed with soot, the shelves stacked with jars that catch the light in odd glimmers. Honey, crushed date pits, resin, myrrh, dried beetle wings. There are charms here, 2 bundled reeds, statuettes of Torit and Bez, worn soft from being passed between hands too frightened to admit it. You sit, and the midwife begins a new ritual. It's not flashy. There's no incantation, no dramatic gesture. Just questions. How you're feeling. What hurts. Whether the bleeding has slowed. Whether milk flows. You answer simply, and she listens. Not like a priest listens. Like a mother might, if she were too tired or too far away. And then, in silence, she reaches for a cloth soaked in vinegar and palm oil, places it against your back, and presses. It stings. It helps. You stay like that for some time, quiet, breathing. The baby sleeps, tucked into a sling beside you. This is healing, Egyptian style. Not sterile or scientific, but deeply human, steeped in time and trial. Every tool here was learned not from a scroll, but from hands, stories, generations of repetition. What worked stayed. What failed was buried with the woman it failed. There's something curious about this woman, though. The others defer to her, but not with fear, with familiarity. You begin to see her not just as a midwife, but as something broader, a keeper of unspoken truths. In some regions of ancient Egypt, midwives were more than attendants. They were spiritual mediators, bridges between the living and the unborn, the healthy and the sick. A good midwife didn't just help you survive birth. She kept your household from unraveling during it. And yet, for all their power, midwives often vanished from the written record. Historians still debate whether this absence was due to social hierarchy, gender bias in scribal tradition, or simply the ephemeral nature of oral knowledge. But their fingerprints remain in the tools passed down, in the prayers whispered during labor, in the strange consistency of practices separated by centuries and kingdoms. There's a story the midwife tells as she wraps your belly with a linen sash soaked in aloe and wine. It's not a story with a beginning or end more, like a riddle or an old song. Something about a woman who gave birth to twins, one of whom never stopped crying. She buried a carnelian bead beside the threshold, and the crying stopped. No one knows why. But women still bury beads. You leave the sanctuary with a pouch of herbs, a sliver of beeswax, and a mark drawn on your wrist in ochre. It's not medicine in the way temples dispense it, but it does something. You feel steadier, more rooted, as though someone has confirmed what you were afraid to believe, that what you've done is immense, and that it cost you something, and that it's okay to admit that. That night, you hang the pouch above your bed, next to the rattle gifted last week. You hold the baby a little closer, but your thoughts stray toward the midwife, toward the women who sit silently behind other doorways with aching backs and rising fevers, toward the ones who didn't come back from birth. You wonder if they had someone like her. You hope so. Before sleep takes you, you whisper a word you heard today, something soft and old and soothing. You're not sure if it's a name or a prayer or just a sound made to keep ghosts at bay. But the child stirs and settles, and the house falls quiet, and the linen cools against your skin. The Nile begins to recede, just a little. The high water has peaked, and now gently pulls back, leaving behind the promise of silt-rich fields and the faint stench of wet clay. You catch the scent on the breeze, something green and rank, something that signals change. Just as the river retreats from its banks, so too does the intense closeness of your early days of motherhood begin to thin. Not vanish, just loosen. Life, like the Nile, begins to shift again. Your husband appears more often now. Not hovering, not prying, but present. He nods when he sees you, offers the child a crooked finger to grasp. It's not affection as you once dreamed it, those imagined moments of poetic tenderness. It's something quieter, built of nods and errands, of checking the reed roof and fixing the latch on the storeroom door. But you take it. Sometimes in this world, love shows up looking like obligation. He brings news from the temple district. A priestess has given birth, and there's talk of a ceremonial feast. Not for the child, she won't be seen in public for months, but for the idea of fertility, the community's collective sigh of survival. You've never met the woman, but you feel oddly connected. You both cross that threshold. You both know the before and after. You glance at your child, bundled and quiet, and feel the curious pride that stirs when another woman gives birth. As if each new life reaffirms your own survival. Later that week, your sister-in-law arrives unannounced, laughing as she shoulders through the doorway with a woven tray stacked high with reeds and tiny clay jars. We're making tokens, she says, as though that explains everything. And apparently it does. She spreads out the materials on the floor and beckons you to sit. A bit bewildered, you settle beside her. She begins to mold soft clay into small shapes birds, fish, the eye of Horus, even a stylized crocodile that looks more like a sandal than a beast. She paints them with crushed ochre and powdered charcoal, sets them to dry in the sun. You follow suit, your fingers fumbling, amused by your lopsided falcon. These are not toys, though the children in the household will inevitably steal them. They're charms, votives, talismans for protection and luck. Once dried, some will be buried in corners of the home, some tucked into mats, some placed beside sleeping babies. A few will be offered at shrines, tokens of thanks to Tauret, to Bays, to whoever seemed to listen. The quirky part? One of the tokens you shape is a frog, at her insistence. For fertility, she says, winking. You raise an eyebrow. You think I need more of that? She shrugs, all mischief. You never know. Better to stay on their good side. It's a moment light and strange and domestic, a far cry from your recent aches and rituals. And yet, it feels vital. Women in ancient Egypt were not often given control over public decisions, but within the home, this was their kingdom. Through charms and recipes, through rituals both spoken and unspoken, they wove meaning into the very walls. Historians still debate the boundary between religion and daily life in Egyptian households. Was every charm a form of worship, or merely habit wrapped in tradition? Some argue that domestic religion was a diluted form of temple practice, while others believe it held a power all its own, rooted in the everyday miracles of survival and care. You don't need the answer. You only need the moment's sunlight on clay, the laughter of your sister-in-law, the curious gaze of your baby, watching your hands move. You place your frog beside your child's swaddle, just in case. Not because you believe in magic, but because belief isn't always the point. That evening, as the air cools and the courtyard quiets, you step outside for the first time in days without carrying the baby. Just for a moment, just to breathe. The stars are already out, unblinking and ancient. You tilt your face to them and let your thoughts drift far beyond your doorstep. You are not a priestess. You are not a queen. You are not carved into walls or remembered in song. But you are here, shaping tiny frogs and whispering songs and counting your child's breaths in the dark. And that, somehow, feels like enough. The days settle into a strange rhythm, neither restful nor chaotic, just endlessly looping. You rise with the sun or with the baby's cry, whichever comes first. You eat quickly, without ceremony. You wash cloth, press herbs, change reeds in the bedding. The tasks blur. There is always something that must be done. But you are no longer thinking of your body as broken or your child as fragile. There is strength now underneath the softness. Mid-morning brings visitors, two women you do not recognize, but who know your name. They are older, dressed simply, their fingers stained with henna, and their feet calloused from long walks. They bring no gifts, only questions. One settles onto the reed mat and begins examining your baby, gently but thoroughly. The other observes you, your posture, your skin, the steadiness of your gaze. They are temple midwives, perhaps, or herbalists, or something older still. No one says. Their questions are not cruel, but precise. Has the child fed from both sides? Does the cord stump smell? Have the eyes cleared yet? You answer carefully, grateful for your sister-in-law's presence nearby, steadying the mood with warm spiced beer and light jokes about crying too much being a sign of cleverness. When the older woman finally nods, it's not approval, it's permission. She gestures to your arm. You offer it, confused, and she ties a narrow band of woven linen just above your wrist. Into the knot, she slips a tiny feather. Return, she says simply. You understand this isn't about going back to something. It's a signal, a marker that you've crossed the threshold from confinement to participation. You're allowed now to return to the market, to the temple, to the gatherings of women where news flows faster than the Nile. The feather is more than decoration. It's a social cue. In some Egyptian communities, women who had recently given birth were considered set apart for a time protected, but also partially excluded. The number of days varied, sometimes 14, sometimes 40. Not punishment, not shame, just caution. You were closer to the edge of life and death, and now you must be eased gently back in. Scholars still debate the origin of such customs. Were they religious, rooted in purification rites, or purely medical, designed to limit infection? There is evidence for both. Papyri speak of cleansing baths, of temple prayers, of reintegration ceremonies, but also of herbs and oils and diet. The boundary between the sacred and the scientific was, as always, delightfully muddled. The quirky part? In some villages, the end of confinement was celebrated with a small feast, not for the mother, but for the threshold itself. Women would gather at the doorstep, scattering herbs and pouring milk as an offering to the household gods. You once thought this odd. Now it feels right. The line between outside and inside is something worth acknowledging. That afternoon, your mother-in-law cooks lentils with more salt than usual. She sets the best stool for you by the door, says nothing, but lets the baby nap on her lap longer than ever before. It's the closest thing to a celebration you expect. And it is enough. You step into the market square later, wrapped in a looser robe, hair tied back, feet dusty again. You hold your child against your chest in a sling and breathe in the scent of dates, onions, and wet rope. The sounds rush at you, vendors shouting, donkeys braying, the clatter of a broken jar. But you are not overwhelmed. You are here. And you are no longer only watching. Women greet you, touch the baby's feet, murmur blessings. Someone offers a dried fig. Another slips a folded scrap of linen into your palm. It smells of incense and ink. You do not unfold it. Some things are meant to be carried, not read. You pass by a stall selling small amulets and see, among the usual eyes and lions, a worn carving of Isis. Her arms cradle a child, serene and powerful. You wonder if the vendor knows how many women have bought that same image for the same reason-silent prayers turned into pocket-sized hope. You don't buy one. You simply look and walk on, clutching the feather at your wrist. There's something peculiar about time after childbirth. It stretches, coils, snaps back without warning. Days fold into one another like layers of linen, indistinguishable in color and feel. One moment you are counting how long your child feeds. The next, you're standing beneath the sycamore tree, unsure whether it's morning or noon. It's not confusion, exactly. Just immersion. You are underwater in your own life, breathing differently. Still, beneath the haze, something shifts. You notice it one morning when you set your child down, and they don't cry immediately. Instead, they look up at you, actually look with something almost like understanding. Their hands reach out, awkward and unsure, but purposeful. You realize they're not a newborn anymore. They are becoming, and that means you must become too. You begin to reclaim little pieces of your old world. You sweep the courtyard with a sharper rhythm. You hum while kneading bread. You greet the neighbor's goat with a snort instead of startled silence. These things sound small, but they are not. They are returns, not to who you were, but to someone who can carry that memory forward. Your mother-in-law notices. She doesn't say much. She rarely does, but one evening she leaves a clean tunic folded near your basin. It's simple, dyed with crushed pomegranate skin, the color of softened clay. New, for you. You don't ask where it came from. You simply wear it the next morning, and no one mentions it. That's how praise works, sometimes. Later that week, your husband's sister invites you to help with something curious. She's building a shrine small and temporary, made of mud brick and reeds, near the corner of the compound where the grain is stored. Not a public shrine, not a grand temple replica, a private offering space, something intimate. A space where small things are noticed by large forces. You join her after supper. Together you press tiny symbols into the soft clay eyes, stars, lotus petals. She lays amulets inside before the bricks dry. Not just for the gods, she says, but for the spirit of the house. For protection, for health, for a good season, and for mothers. You wonder, not for the first time, where this tradition came from. Was it always like this? Did her grandmother build one? Will your daughter someday kneel beside hers and do the same? Scholars still debate the nature of these household shrines. Some say they were purely superstitious, part of a domestic magic women practiced apart from official religion. Others argue they were powerful statements of personal faith, female-led theology, carved into backyards and doorposts. Whatever their origin, these shrines remind you that worship isn't always grand. Sometimes it smells like wet earth and flickers like a rushlight. The quirky part? She tells you about one household that placed dried fish bones inside their shrine to keep away illness. You laugh, but later you slip one in too, just in case. As the days warm and the wind thickens with dust, your household begins to prepare for the next festival. Not a huge one-no state procession, no days of rest, but a local honoring of Hathor, the golden goddess of motherhood, music, and joy. Women take this seriously. Offerings of wine, songs sung into clay flutes, and in some cases, the ceremonial shaking of sister rattles, made of metal and reeds, meant to drive away darkness. You are invited to join the other women as they prepare garlands of dried flowers and bake honey cakes shaped like cows and moons. You've never attended before. But now, with your child watching from the sling on your hip, you are part of this strange chorus of laughter, gossip, and sudden reverence. The market smells different this week, sweeter somehow. Everyone seems to be waiting for something. A renewal, maybe, or a reason to exhale. On the day of the festival, you rise before dawn. You wash your face in water, perfumed with herbs. You wrap yourself in your clay-colored tunic. You braid your hair. Your mother-in-law hands you a necklace thread of lapis and shell. It's worn, clearly passed down. You accept it without words. The procession is small but lively. Women sing, children clap. A small clay figure of Hathor is carried in a reed basket, adorned with painted eyes and dried figs. Offerings are placed at the shrine: milk, dates, a lock of baby hair. You do not ask what each means. You simply follow, echo, participate. At one point, an older woman presses a sistrum into your hand. You hesitate? She raises an eyebrow. You rattle it gently, then harder. It makes a dry, clinking sound like bones wrapped in song. Your baby coos in reply. That night, your family eats flatbread, dipped in honey and boiled greens with vinegar. The mood is soft content. You catch your husband glancing at the child with something almost like awe. You don't disturb it. After the others have gone to sleep, you sit by the entrance of your home. The sky above you is dark velvet scattered with stars, so old they probably watched over every birth before yours. You hold your child and hum a broken version of the song from earlier, unsure of the words, but certain of the feeling. You're not just surviving anymore. You are dwelling. You are marking time not by blood and recovery, but by clay shrines and rattles and shared bread. You are part of something old, something quiet, something fierce. And as your child drifts off to sleep against your chest, you wonder what their first memory will be. A voice? A song? A flickering shadow on the wall? You hope it's this breath, this night, this moment where all is held and nothing is hurried. The rhythm of your life has changed again, although no one announces it. There are no ceremonies for this phase, no offerings laid at the threshold, no wise elder stepping forward with cryptic advice. It happens quietly, almost sneakily. One day you notice that the baby no longer fits snugly in the sling you've worn since birth. Their head peaks higher, their weight presses harder into your hip. They reach for things now clay bowls, weaving shuttles, your husband's reed-pen tiny hands grabbing at the world with greedy delight. Childhood has arrived, softly, without fanfare. Your role stretches again. You are no longer only the protector of a fragile being. Now you are a teacher, a boundary setter, an interpreter of dangers that don't come with teeth. You explain why bees sting, why the dog growls near the oven, why the canal isn't a place to play alone. You do this without realizing it. It becomes your language, warning, redirecting, laughing, soothing. The courtyard grows louder. Children from nearby homes gather more often. They toddle and stumble, clutching toys made of mud and straw. One brings a wooden crocodile on a string. Another insists her doll can speak if fed enough lentils. You watch these small lies with amusement. Children, it seems, are all little priests of pretend. Your child begins to mimic the older ones. They stomp like donkeys, hide like ibises, screech like cats fighting over a fishbone. It is a performance without audience, without purpose, and yet entirely sacred. You learn, in your own way, to play too. You draw animals in the dust with a twig. You chase and pretend to be caught. You make silly faces over the laundry line. You let your child rub dough into their eyebrows, just to see the grin it causes. This is how you earn their trust, not through discipline or lessons, but through joyful nonsense. Trust, after all, is a kind of worship. And in ancient Egypt, the household was a temple too. It wasn't always silent or solemn. Archaeological fragments show toys, carved hippos, ivory dice, spinning tops. Some even suggest children had pets, monkeys, dogs, even turtles kept in woven baskets. Parenting, as the scholars say, was not merely about raising heirs. It was about cultivating life within walls of clay and custom. And sometimes it involved peculiar rites of passage. In certain regions, when a child took their first steps, the mother would mark the threshold with soot and water, a charm against accidents, a signal to the household gods that this little one now walked among them with purpose. You do something similar, though you invent the ritual yourself, tying a dried lotus petal to your child's ankle as they waddle from the doorway to the pomegranate tree. Historians still debate the purpose of these customs. Were they magical protections, early childhood ceremonies, or simply maternal creativity made sacred through repetition? You don't care. It feels right, so you do it. Your days are no less tiring. In fact, they're harder in some ways. Your child no longer sleeps at predictable hours. They explore with alarming speed, get tangled in tools, startle chickens, and develop a fascination with the hearth that borders on worship. You are always 2 steps behind. Your back aches. Your patience grows thinner. But your world expands too. You begin helping with simple trades, grinding barley, threading rushes into mats, braiding fish traps from palm fibers. You are no longer merely cared for. You are contributing. Your child watches, mimics. They sit beside you with broken reeds, pretending to twist them into ropes. They copy your huff of breath when something tangles. They wrinkle their nose just like you. One afternoon, your husband brings home a papyrus scrap with a strange, smiling face painted on it. A festival mask, he says, from the scribes' quarters. They were throwing old ones away. Your child grabs it instantly. They wear it on their forehead and declare themselves cat god for the rest of the day. Even while napping, you keep the mask. Tuck it in a jar with dried herbs. It will rot eventually, but for now, it holds a memory. Not a milestone, just a fragment. But fragments build the house, don't they? Later that month, an old woman visits your home. She smells of resin and sour milk and walks with a stick carved like a spiral. You're told she's a midwife, once renowned, now retired. She takes one look at your child, nods, and says, "Strong lungs." You ask nothing more, but her words stay with you like a blessing. The quirky detail? Before leaving, she gives you a small stone carved with a face. Not a god, not a scribe, just a face. To watch over them, she says. And to remind you, you're still being watched too. You don't ask by whom. That evening, you place the stone near your child's sleeping mat. Not because you believe in talismans, though perhaps you do, but because it feels like a kindness from another life. A gesture handed from one mother to another, across time. You fall asleep beside your child. the night wind stirring the papyrus blinds, the house sighing in its beams. You dream of faces smiling, frowning, masked, bare, and when you wake, you remember none of them fully, only the feeling they left behind. There is power in parenting. You realize not the kind that rules, but the kind that preserves. The power of carrying, repeating, retelling. The power of choosing each morning to teach the world gently to someone who has just arrived in it. And so, with the sun rising again and your child babbling about something only they understand, you get up, brush the dust from your tunic, and begin another day in the temple of home. The seasons shift again, though not with ceremony. You notice it first in the air, the way it hangs heavier at dusk, the smell of ripened dates, the slow return of flies to places they don't belong. The Nile is quieter now, its muddy edge cracked like dry lips. Your child squats near it with a stick, poking at tadpoles that dart like punctuation marks across the water's surface. The reeds rustle, as if whispering something only they can hear. At home, the pace slows. Not because life is easier, but because you've adapted. The endless clamor of early motherhood has settled into something steadier. You wake before dawn without needing to be called. Your hands know the weight of water jars before you lift them. You can tell what the goat wants just by the tilt of her head. Your child walks more confidently now, though their legs are still uncertain during sleep. You find them some mornings curled at odd angles, feet twitching, dreaming of running. They speak in short bursts, half words, gestures, grunts that only you seem to understand. It is like being the priestess of a single-person religion. No one else can interpret the sacred sounds, but you know exactly what they mean. And with understanding comes expectation. Your child has begun asking questions, not with words, but with pointed looks, frowns, outstretched hands. Why is the fire hot? Why is the beetle dead? Why can't they eat the blue powder the potter left behind? You explain gently. Sometimes you lie. Sometimes you distract. Sometimes you tell the truth, and it sits in the space between you like a coiled rope neither of you wants to pull. One morning, your child returns from the neighbor's house clutching a flat clay disc. On it, a picture has been scratched 3 wavy lines and a stick figure holding what looks like a fish. It's you, they say. You're in the water. You blink. You don't correct them. It's as good a metaphor as any. The old woman who lives across the courtyard stops you that afternoon. She asks if you've considered teaching your child to mark symbols. Start early, she says, even if they only remember the shapes. You nod, though you're not sure if that's allowed. Not every child gets to learn letters. Not every family is tied to scribes or temples. Still, you find yourself tracing symbols in the dust when no one's watching out. Read, loaf. Your child copies them, badly but proudly. In some Egyptian households, early writing was a privilege linked to status, but mothers played a quiet role in it too. They began with stories oral tales passed between bowls of stew and baskets of laundry. Then came songs, and from songs, symbols. Some children learned their first marks not at school, but while watching their mothers' balance accounts or label jars. Historians still debate how widespread literacy truly was among women. Some claim it was a narrow river, flowing only through elite households. Others argue for a broader floodplain, where practical knowledge marking tallies, naming gods, sketching ownership flowed through everyday hands. You're not sure where your family falls, but you know your child's name looks beautiful in dust. Later that week, You and your sister-in-law take the children to visit a weaver on the edge of the village. She's older than anyone can guess and spins linen as fine as spider silk. Her home smells of flax and goats as she laughs like thunder cracking over dry land. She agrees to teach the little ones how to twist fibers, though she insists they must sing while doing it, or the thread will snap out of boredom. The children sing, badly, loudly. One boy invents lyrics about crocodiles wearing sandals. The others collapse in giggles. Your child grins with every crooked note. You realize, watching them, that they are no longer just absorbing the world. They're shaping it. They're creating culture, one ridiculous verse at a time. The quirky part? At the end of the lesson, the weaver ties a thread around each child's wrist, red for protection, blue for cleverness. She doesn't explain the meaning. She just winks and tells them not to take it off until the moon is full. You leave with your child, tugging at the thread and humming a song about frogs stealing dates. That night, they dream with their mouth open, as if singing even in sleep. Your husband has been quieter lately, not distant, just warm. The taxes have risen again. The river is low. You see the tension in the way he sets his jaw when counting grain. Still, he finds time to lift your child onto his shoulders at twilight, to tell them stories about stars that float in boats across the sky. You watch them together, father and child, both trying to believe in the safety of nightfall. One evening, as you scrub laundry by lantern light, your mother-in-law sits beside you. She doesn't speak for a long time. Then she says, "You've done well. It's not much, but it's more than you expected. And in this house, such words are not given lightly." You nod. You don't smile. But something settles in your chest, like a stone that chooses to become part of the foundation rather than press it down. You carry your child to bed, humming an old tune whose words you've forgotten, but whose melody still works like a charm. You lay them down, kiss their brow, and whisper nothing at all. Outside, the night stretches over the fields like a vast net. Inside, the threads of your life twist tighter into something lasting linen. Love and stories no one will ever write down, but which matter all the same. There's a quiet moment in every mother's day when the noise briefly disappears. Not because the house is empty, or because the children have suddenly taken vows of silence, but because you've grown used to the rhythm of life, the shuffle of feet, the creak of the door, the slosh of water in clay jars. It all becomes background music, and in that softened hush, you find yourself pausing over something small and strange. The way your child's fingers chase a moth, the slant of shadow through a woven screen, the smell of warm dust. These are the moments that make the day real. Not the chores, not the meals, not the sweeping. Your child is speaking in full sentences now. Crooked ones, yes, with verbs in odd places, and nouns that slip away mid-thought, but still sentences. They ask why the stars don't fall, why dogs can't climb palm trees, whether bread feels sadness when it's torn. You answer each question as best you can, trying not to laugh too hard or sound too wise. You have learned by now that too much certainty spoils the game. Their curiosity is insatiable. They want to know everything: how the roof stays up, how dates ripen, how fish breathe. And somehow, this hunger reawakens yours. You catch yourself watching the weavers more carefully, asking the potter how he glazes with salt, listening to the old reed player when she hums the song for banishing scorpions. You are becoming a student again, led by a teacher who still can't tie their own sandals. One afternoon, while gathering figs near the outer wall, your child finds a scarab beetle flipped on its back. They crouch, watching it struggle. "Help it," they whisper. "You do gently." The beetle rights itself and scuttles away. Your child watches, solemn. "Do gods help like that?" they ask. You pause. "Sometimes," you reply, "when someone notices." In ancient Egyptian homes, scarabs weren't just insects. They were symbols of life, regeneration, and divine order. Children were often taught to respect them. Some families even pressed small beetle-shaped tokens into their children's hands as good luck charms. Not because they expected miracles, but because they believed in small signs pointing toward larger truths. That evening, you shape dough into a rough beetle shape and bake it among the flatbreads. Your child finds it, shrieks with laughter, and insists on saving it instead of eating it. It now lives beside their sleeping mat, next to a pebble they claim is magic, and a feather they insist fell from a god's bird. You don't correct them. You build a little altar for these treasures, lining them up in a broken bowl filled with straw. The house gains another sacred corner, one only you and your child tend. As days pass, your child begins to help in more serious ways. They sweep grain that spills during storage. They count bundles of herbs drying on the rafters. They watch the chickens, though occasionally chase them too. These aren't chores yet, not really, more like rehearsals for participation. They are learning the script of the household, scene by quiet scene. Your sister-in-law begins teaching the older children how to read simple signs: house, bird, fish, man. Your child sits on the edge of the group, mouthing the shapes with their fingers, drawing in the dust when no one's looking. One morning, they show you a perfect loop for the symbol of life. You smile, and they grin back as though they've uncovered a treasure buried just for you. Historians still debate how early literacy was taught in domestic settings. Some suggest that informal instruction began at home, particularly when a household had ties to scribal professions or trade. Others argue that education was formalized and exclusive, filtered through priestly hierarchies. But amid the scrolls and monuments, it is easy to forget that every scribe was once a child drawing squiggles in sand. The quirky part? In some rural areas, children's early practice scrolls were made not of papyrus, but of smooth pottery shards. These ostraka were cheaper and more abundant, and children often doodled on them: snakes with human heads, boats with wings, stick figures dancing with exaggerated hips. You find a similar shard one day, discarded behind the storage room. Your child claims it immediately and insists it's a message from a long-dead cousin. You agree. It would be rude to question the ancestors. That night, you dream of winged boats floating across a sea of red clay. When you wake, your child is already up, humming tunelessly, drawing in the dust again. You've noticed something else, too. They've begun asking about before, not just what things are, but what they were. Did you climb trees when you were little? Did your mother sing? What was your favorite animal? These questions catch you off guard. You don't always know how to answer. Your memories feel fragile, like colors left too long in the sun. But you try. You tell them about the swing made from date palm rope, the dog with one ear, the way your father clapped when the bread rose high. Your child listens, solemn, then tells you that when they're grown, they'll remember this: the fig beetle, the beetle bread, your laugh when the goat sneezed. And just like that, the household deepens. Its walls become thicker with echoes. its air denser with memory. You are not just raising a child. You are preserving a lineage, not in bloodlines or names carved into stone, but in beetles flipped, songs sung, and eyes widened at the sight of symbols drawn in dust. When night falls, your child asks for a story. You make one up. It's about a scarab who forgets it's sacred and thinks it's just a bug. It crawls through the desert, complains about the heat, meets a confused ibis who teaches it to fly. Your child laughs in the dark. Beetles can't fly. They say, sacred ones can, you reply. And for a moment, it doesn't matter what's true. It only matters that they believe you. And maybe that you almost believe yourself. By now, your child has learned to wander just far enough that they can pretend they're alone, but not so far that you can't see their dust trail curling behind them. You watch from the shaded edge of the courtyard, kneading dough with one hand, eyes following that little blur of limbs and determination. They're hunting beetles again, or pretending to. They carry a stick like a scepter, ruling over a kingdom of lizards and fig trees. You let them, because these are the years when imagination stretches further than discipline can reach. The house is quieter lately, not silent, just softer. Your child speaks less like a stream and more like a storyteller now. They edit their thoughts, shape them into sequences, offer explanations even when you didn't ask. It's both delightful and a little strange. Where did that certainty come from? The bold way they explain that clouds are just gods who forgot to bathe, or that the moon is following them specifically. You don't correct them. Not yet. Belief is a delicate kind of clay. It must be handled with warmth until it sets. Some evenings, they sit beside you and draw figures in the dirt. Boats, crocodiles, strange creatures with bird wings and lion tails. Once, they draw a person with a large eye in the middle of their chest. That's you, they say. You see everything. You laugh, but the statement stays with you. You remember when your own mother seemed like that, unblinking, all-knowing. And you wonder when that illusion will slip from your own child's eyes. That week, your child is invited to their first community gathering. Not a formal one, just a gathering of mothers and children under the shade of an old sycamore fig. There's music, rattles made of shells, a woman with a tambourine. The children dance awkwardly, joyfully. Some fall down and laugh harder because of it. You watch from the edge, heart tight and proud. A boy your child's age offers them a carved piece of bone, a whistle. They blow into it with the dignity of a pharaoh, announcing a decree. It sounds awful, but your child beams like they've mastered an ancient art. In ancient Egypt, childhood wasn't ignored. It was ritualized in small ways. Toys, songs, community gatherings. These were not just diversions, but tools for shaping the young spirit. Scholars have found dolls with movable limbs, carved spinning tops, and even small amulets strung around children's necks to ward off evil. One unusual find, a child's bracelet made from dried fish vertebrae, rattling softly with each step. Perhaps a toy, perhaps a warning bell, perhaps both. Historians still debate the degree of freedom Egyptian children had in their early years. Some believe they were indulged until about age 5, after which training for adult life began in earnest. Others suggest that class determined everything, that wealthy children learned writing while poorer ones learned to sweep. Yet within those walls, mothers often shaped the earliest education, regardless of wealth. You begin teaching your child small tasks. How to braid a reed into a basket handle. how to pour water without spilling, how to fold a cloth into a head wrap, not because they must learn now, but because they want to. And you realize quietly that your own mother did the same. The lessons that felt like games at the time were the very skills that keep your household whole today. The quirky moment comes when your child tries to mimic your bread stamps. You have a small stone seal passed down from your husband's mother, carved with a lotus and a sunburst. Each loaf gets pressed before baking. One day, your child insists on making their own stamp. They use a fig, press it into a bit of clay, and smash it into a dough ball. It flattens awkwardly, seeds sticking out like a bad omen. They're thrilled. They name it the Seal of the Round Pharaoh. You let them stamp the entire batch. Later, your husband bites into a loaf and finds half a fig. He raises an eyebrow. New recipe? You shrug. Experimental bakery. That night, you dream of bread that glows in the dark, marked with tiny stars, eaten by beetles who chant your child's name. You wake smiling. Your child's friendships are growing now. They talk about other children as if they're epic heroes. Senab, who ran the whole canal. Aipu, who tamed a goat with only a look. You listen and nod, aware that these names will come and go, but the feeling of belonging is sinking deep. You begin to feel something else to a shift in your place. The older women speak to you now as a peer. They ask for your opinion on linen dyes, on storing honey, on where to place protective charms during flu season. You offer answers carefully, still not used to being consulted. But you realize your voice holds weight now. You are no longer the bride. You are a woman with a child and a place in the rhythm of this house. Your mother-in-law leaves you in charge of the kitchen one afternoon. She says it casually, like it's nothing, but you notice the pause in her voice, the way she hands over the clay spice jars with both hands. It feels like an initiation. You prepare the meal. Your child helps. They count lentils, stir the stew, add salt with theatrical flair. When everyone eats quietly, no one mentions the change. But you know it happened. And when the dishes are cleared and your child curls into your lap, sticky with date syrup and soot, they whisper, "Today was your best day." You nod. It was? Outside, the breeze carries the scent of sun-warmed grain. Inside, your house feels fuller, not with things, but with time. Layers of memory, layers of effort. You realize you are no longer holding your child through life. You are walking beside them, sometimes just behind. Some days begin not with the cry of a rooster or the clatter of jugs, but with a child shaking your shoulder and whispering, "Wake up, I saw something." You're not sure what time it is. The stars are still out. The world feels half-formed, like wet clay. But you sit up anyway, because that tone urgent, wide-eyed, is the music of parenthood. You follow your child outside, where the sky is deep indigo and the moon hangs like a polished shard of shell. They point to a cluster of shadows near the granary. "I think it was a jackal," they say, "or maybe a ghost." You scan the dark. Nothing moves, just grain sacks and night. Still, you thank them. You kneel and whisper that bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about telling someone when you are. They beam, and with that, they fall back asleep on your shoulder before you can even carry them inside. The next morning, the story has evolved. It wasn't a jackal. It was a spirit with golden eyes who protects the wheat. You smile. They're mixing mythology and grain rations again. A classic combination in this house. There's a pulse to the village now, harvest season approaching, fields buzzing with preparations. Your child joins you for small tasks, brushing chaff from baskets, stacking dried reeds, watching as the grown-ups debate the timing of offerings. They carry a stick again. This time, it's a pretend measuring rod. They poke at roots and declare how deep the gods have allowed this year's barley to grow. One morning, the temple scribe passes through, taking note of the year's growth and collecting tallies. Your child watches him with unblinking fascination. When he offers a nod of acknowledgement, they burst into a whispered flurry. He knows everything, doesn't he? Even the secrets? In ancient Egypt, the role of scribes was close to sacred. They recorded births, tracked taxes, logged floods. Their ink was more than practical. It was memory itself. Few attained that position without lineage or long training, and most children learned only by watching from a distance. But even a glimpse of such power left impressions on young minds, especially those already enchanted by marks and symbols. Later that week, your child begins writing again in dust. This time, not just copying what they've seen, but inventing. They draw a creature with feathers and fangs, then label it with squiggles you don't recognize. This is the guardian of grain, they explain. It eats liars. You nod solemnly. Good to have around. The quirky part? Your child insists the creature can only be summoned with a song made from breadcrumbs and goat sneezes. They spend the rest of the afternoon trying to coax the goat into cooperation. The goat remains unmoved. Your sister-in-law laughs and says, "He's got your imagination." You correct her. "It's theirs. I'm just the keeper." That evening, your husband brings home a broken pot. Not for cooking, he wants to repurpose it into a teaching shard. For writing, he says, they'll want to try ink next. It's a small gesture, but it feels like planting a seed. You crush charcoal with honey and leftover wine. It stains fingers, clothes, everything it touches. But when your child dips a twig into it and drags a bold line across the shard, they gasp as if the world has spoken back. You save that first mark, even though it looks like a fish with a limp. In the following days, your child writes messages no one can read and leaves them in corners of the house like offerings. You find one beneath your water jar, one beside the sleeping mat, one tucked behind a basket of lentils. You don't understand them, but you keep them all. Historians still debate whether children's scribbles in ancient households were dismissed or preserved. Some fragments show play letters and nonsense signs. Others bear the beginnings of formal writing. Perhaps mothers saved these not because of their content, but because they marked a child's movement toward something larger, a future, a voice, a place in memory. There's another shift you begin to notice. Your child now comforts others. When a neighbor's boy scrapes his knee, it's your child who brings water. When your sister-in-law sighs too loudly over laundry, it's your child who hums an off-key tune until she smiles. You don't say much about it, but pride hums in your chest like a hidden drum. One night, during a rare moment of calm, your husband asks, "What do you think they'll be?" You know he means in the distant sense scribe, weaver, dreamer, caretaker. You shrug. Happy, I hope, brave, kind. He nods. That's enough. But after he sleeps, you watch your child draw shapes in the soot beside the fire pit. You don't interrupt. And you realize you no longer think of them as small. They're becoming, not just growing, but forming. The days ahead will bring work, dust, sore backs, broken pots, new questions. But this moment, the hush of charcoal, the glint of firelight on tiny ink-stained hands feels like a monument, one that needs no stone. The heat begins to thicken again. The air tastes of ripening grain and slow-moving water. You wait to the sound of frogs murmuring in the irrigation ditches and know that the flood season is near. The Nile, patient and ancient, is preparing to swell. The whole village begins to brace for it, not with panic, but with the slow rhythm of generations who've done this before. You and your child walk to the riverbank together one morning, baskets swinging gently between you. They point out clouds shaped like crocodiles. You pretend to be startled. They grin like it's the oldest joke in the world, and maybe it is. The reeds are taller this year. The boats move slower, weighted with jars and sacks. You both collect river mud for potting. Your child insists on finding a perfect frog-shaped clump. You let them keep it, of course. They name it Mud Guardian. It guards your kitchen from bad smells, they say. Back at the house, the days stretch lazily, yet they are never idle. You mend mats, scrub linens, string garlands of dry herbs. Your child shadows you, no longer just watching, but helping with quiet precision. They know which pots leak, which baskets creak, which corners catch the most dust. It's not just mimicry anymore, it's contribution. The women in the household notice. They begin asking your child to fetch this or stir that. Your child accepts these tasks with solemnity, even when the task is clearly just an excuse to include them. And when one aunt offers them a small wooden amulet, a crudely carved ankh, softened from years of handling, it feels like an acknowledgement. Not of skill, but of place. They belong. One afternoon, the village prepares a modest procession for the goddess Torit. The children carry little offerings, papyrus ropes, flower bundles, scraps of bread. Your child walks barefoot beside you, carrying a clay figure of a hippo with painted eyes. They made it themselves. It looks more like a melted ox than a divine protector, but they are fiercely proud. In ancient Egypt, Taurit, the fierce maternal goddess with the body of a hippopotamus guarded pregnancy and birth. Figurines of her stood in homes across the Nile, grinning fiercely from shells and niches. Scholars note how her image crossed social lines. Poor homes and noble courts alike made space for her presence. Not because she was elegant, but because she was powerful. A reminder that strength could come from softness and protection from a snarling mother's love. Your child places their figurine carefully at the base of the shrine. They whisper something you can't hear. Perhaps a wish, perhaps a secret. You do not ask. You simply stand beside them. The quirky detail? During certain festivals, women in some regions made protective amulets from dough and dried them in the sun, then hung them in doorways. If they cracked cleanly, it meant the household was favored. If they crumbled, the dough was scattered to the birds with a prayer. Your child makes one of these after the procession, entirely unprompted. It breaks in half. They declare it a blessing anyway. Half is still a lot, they say. You agree. That evening, the air turns gold. Not metaphorically truly golden. The sun slants through the date palms at a perfect angle, lighting dust motes into a dance. You and your child sit on the steps, fingers sticky from honey cakes, watching as neighbors walk by with baskets and laughter. And in this moment, you feel something settle not in your bones, but in your sense of time. You've crossed some invisible line. You are no longer learning how to be here. You are here. The house breathes with your rhythm. The child beside you hums a melody that matches your own. Historians still debate the nature of parenthood in antiquity. Were mothers deeply involved in their children's spiritual formation? Or was it delegated to elders and priests? Were homes like yours sites of sacred transmission, or just places to survive the practical grind of seasons? The truth, as always, is likely somewhere in the quiet middle. In the clay frog, in the painted hippo, in the songs hummed without words. Your husband returns from the granaries that night with news of a good season ahead. The barley's strong. The fish traps are full. He brings you a reed basket filled with pomegranates and a smile that doesn't hide its relief. He doesn't say anything poetic, just presses the basket into your hands and nods once. You nod back. Later, when the child sleeps, you press one of the seeds into your tongue. It bursts, tart and red and ancient. You close your eyes and taste the Nile, the sun, the years that have passed since you first arrived in this home, unsure of your footing. And now your footing is sure. Your hands are steady. Your child is growing toward the world with eyes wide open. You've built a life that won't make it into scrolls or tomb paintings, but that doesn't matter. Because someone someday will find a tiny clay beetle, or a mud frog, or a half-cracked bread charm, and wonder who once touched it. And maybe, just maybe, the echo of your days will still whisper faintly through the dust. And now, as the candles burn low and the night folds its arms around your home, the stories of mothers and children along the Nile fade gently into the hush of memory. The air cools. The stars take their places like old friends, steady and silent. Somewhere, reeds whisper in the dark and frogs sing in sleepy chorus, their lullabies unchanged for thousands of years. You sit quietly, listening to your own breath and the heartbeat of the house-soft creaks of wood, a child's sigh as they turn in sleep, the low hum of a world still turning. This life, built from quiet repetitions and small acts of care, has become something sacred in its simplicity. Outside, the river waits, silver and endless. It carries away the worries of the day, the dust of labor, the echoes of laughter. Tomorrow will come, with its firewood and grain, with its scuffed knees and ink-stained fingers. But for now, there is only stillness. You've walked the long arc from birth to belonging, from uncertainty to understanding, through rituals of bread and ink, through whispered blessings and beetle-shaped tokens. You've carved your own story into the hidden walls of history. So rest now. Let the warmth of the hearth curl around you. Let the silence hold you like a prayer. You've seen the shape of a mother's love etched across centuries, and you've worn it well. Sleep deep as the Nile dreams beside you.